All right, YouTube, I've had several people message me asking me about one specific part of the discussion I had last night on Night Watch, and then someone's been also asking in the comments area on that video specifically, and I figured that this would be the one that would interest people the most, about my experience when I was a fairly small kid. I was 3 or 4 years old at the time, and saw what physically appeared to be, I make no claims to its intelligence or it being a being of possessed of any volition of its own, appeared to be Stolas from the Ars Gotia. There were other events also that took place when I was a child, up actually through adulthood. In this particular location, it's actually strange. The apartment that I was living in at the time in Woodstock, a very old, rundown apartment. Not a slum particularly, close to it. In the spring, the roof would leak and a waterfall would be going down the wall. They tried to fix it several times, never quite figured it out. But it was just a step above slum. I was in the lower middle class. We were barely out of poverty. We didn't have much extra. I was never, deprived of toys or anything, like some children, but it wasn't, a particularly luxurious existence. But I'll get into the two more important events and several peripheral events also that happened basically around the same time period and later on as well. The first is the demon experience. First and foremost, I make no claims that the being that I saw or the thing that I saw was an intelligent force, because I don't have enough evidence to say that. I don't say that, oh, well, a demon appeared on my wall and was talking to me and filled me with magical power, and obviously I was chosen by Satan or something. I don't believe in much of that sort of rhetoric. I think that people talk about demons because clearly some force exists that's capable of manifesting itself. But regardless of some ancient tome written hundreds of years ago that illustrates these so-called beings, I don't know whether they are actually intelligent beings or not. What is clear is that I did physically, literally see something that later I was able to identify as looking almost identical to this being of Stolas. Simply, as I discussed, what happened is this being or energy or thing or force did manifest on my wall in a form basically identical to the illustrations of Stolas. When I was a kid, I was, I think, 3 or 4 years old. I believe four. And it did make weird noises. Almost like a whistling of a teapot mixed with like a train chugging or something along those lines. And there was smoke coming out of it, and it was, looking back and forth, glancing at me and then glancing away. I know that it wasn't a hallucination because I've never, other than when I've used drugs much later in college, I've never actually seen anything, hallucinatory in nature. I've never had that type of lucid dream. In fact, half the time I don't remember my dreams at all, and I've never been a sleepwalker. So, and I was completely awake at the time. I hadn't even fallen asleep. I wasn't even really laying down. I was sort of propped up in bed, relaxing and thinking, and saw this thing slowly emerge on my wall. I know that it was real. That I know for sure. I know that something manifested itself there. What I don't claim is I call it a demon because it looks like this demon. I don't claim that it was an intelligent being. I do find that it goes a little bit beyond the realm of coincidence, though, that Stolas, if you study this figure in demonology, in the Ars Gotia or wherever, this demon is called upon to teach people about plants and minerals, essentially. Well, and as I discussed, these are things that became obsessions for me throughout childhood, throughout early adulthood. Even now, look, I've written a book now on herbalism. Um, and yet, at the time when I started learning about these things, when I started familiarizing myself with plants and minerals, it far predates any involvement that I had in the occult. I was still a Christian at the time. but I simply liked this material. I intended to go. I went into college originally studying plant biology and soil science before I switched to anthropology. And they still are in many ways lifelong obsessions for me. I still play around in my garden. I still like studying minerals. I'm not quite as much into that as I used to be, but I had the point. I had all those Grolier cards. I think it's pronounced Grolier. That I had subscribed to. I had probably several tens of thousands of them on all of these different sites around the world and all these minerals, and I was cataloging them and memorizing as much as I could, studying crystals and minerals and things like that because I was interested in it. This interest corresponds around the time that I saw this being, and I never thought anything of it because I wasn't familiar with demonology. But that being said, I don't claim that it's an intelligent being. For all I know, it could be some sort of weird extra dimensional energy or something that people call a demon, but it's actually sort of just a weird sort of locked archival memory of minerals and plants or something that just happens to be given a name. I don't know. I'm into the occult. I'm also into quantum physics, theoretical physics. I'm into all of these things. I can't make a claim as to what specifically I saw, but I do know that I saw something that didn't come from the physical realm around us. That being said, there was another instance. Well, actually, this happened on several occasions. Around the same time of childhood, and I told this person who was commenting, Veritas, that it gets into Radio Werewolf. This is even stranger. And I haven't mentioned this before, partially because I thought that my audience wouldn't take it seriously, because at the time that I first sort of worked this out in my mind and put two and two together, I was more in the atheist crowd than I was the occult and sort of satanic crowd. And, the Satanists that I was talking to were all atheists. They didn't believe in the occult. They were all completely secular. Most of them just wanted to troll Christians. When I was young, and this corresponds strangely enough to sort of the end of the Radio Werewolf experiments, and I've already mentioned this to Nicholas and Xena as well. I probably shouldn't get into what specifically they said back to me, but maybe I'll talk to them and see if I can in the future. Around that time, when they were performing the Zurich experiment and all of these other things, several nights I saw a wolf outside of my window, sort of flash in and out of existence, growling and so forth. Oddly enough, and I can remember exactly what it looked like, and this was again when I was a little kid. It looks exactly like the wolf from Fiery Summons, from the album cover of Radio Werewolf's Fiery Summons album, which in itself is strange. Of course, it doesn't look like a standard, dog or anything. It looks like, growling Fenris wolf. Incidentally, for those who would say, well, you probably saw a dog outside your window and it was illuminated by lightning or a passing headlight or something, that would make sense, except we were on the second floor, about 15 feet above ground level. So I don't think that I saw a dog outside of my window, because clearly if I'm in bed and I'm just looking at my window across from me, the wolf or dog would have to be levitating in order to actually appear there. That doesn't happen. That goes beyond the realm of even the occult for most intents and purposes. But I saw this on several occasions around the time that they were wrapping up Radio Werewolf's occultism, and that's quite strange to me. Incidentally, much later, actually not long before I actually moved here to Rutland from Woodstock. This is when I was a young adult, by the way. This isn't, little kid mode where I'm still, superstitious and seeing, ghouls under the bed, so to speak. Many years later, there was an incident. I was in the corner of my room next to the dresser, and I heard this weird growling noise. Now, again, I'm well above the ground level. There's no animals in the house capable of growling like a wolf or a dog. and yet I heard this weird growling coming from right inside the dresser. Now, there's no animals around. The cats do not make this noise, and the cats weren't even in the room at the time. But I heard this growling quite clearly. I was like 14, 15 years old. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I ran out of that room because I was terrified. Of course, at the time, I was afraid of dogs. I'm not anymore, but at the time I was, because I was, I wasn't 6'2", and into black magic and things like that. So, someone who's a young adult or, in their mid-teens, they get afraid of such a thing, watching a bunch of horror movies, and then all of a sudden you hear that, you're going to freak out. And there were all sorts of other weird things that happened in that house. I swear there was poltergeist activity there because all the things would get misplaced. Nobody had touched them. In the middle of the night, things would just move around on their own. There was one incident in which the remote control of the TV stopped working, and everyone's mystified at how this happened. Turns out the batteries were backwards. Now, nobody had touched it. Everyone thought I had done it. And I swore up and down, I said, I didn't touch the remote. I didn't even really watch TV. I was too busy. The only time I used the TV was to play Nintendo. I hadn't touched it. Nobody else apparently had touched it. It happened in the middle of the night when nobody was awake anyway. And yet all these weird things keep happening in this house. I saw all sorts of weird, I don't know, maybe the entirety of Woodstock is haunted because I saw other weird things there as well. I have seen UFOs. Now, people will think that this makes me some sort of, tinfoil hat, sort of vaguely lunatic individual who's easily given to superstition. But I wasn't. At the time, I was a deist Christian. I was already growing skeptical of religion and the spiritual. This was around the time that I started becoming more of an atheist. I was more skeptical than most of the other people around when it came to things that were spiritual. When it came to ghosts, I was interested in them. I loved watching, Halloween specials and stuff like most kids do. But I didn't believe in these things. I was interested in it from a historical perspective, something that's continued much up until this very day. But it goes beyond the realm of coincidence. This is what does it for me. It goes beyond the realm of coincidence. For me to see something that I later, over a decade later, identify as looking like a demon from the Ars Goetia, which just happens to, in an occult manner, coincide with exactly the forces that I dabbled with within minerals, plants, astronomy, and so forth, that are ascribed to that being. It goes beyond the realm of coincidence. Then I see, Radio Werewolf's wolf in a second-story window on several occasions, flashing and growling, and I'm hearing growling, and I'm seeing weird things in this house. And then later on, I just happen to coincidentally stumble upon their music when I'm looking for totally unrelated things. And then I get so into it for no apparent reason, because at the time I didn't even like goth rock. I suddenly become obsessed with it through no real action of my own, just because I feel that there's something there I need to look into. I'm interested in Charles Manson. I find Superstar. I find out it's the same friggin' person who fronted Radio Werewolf, and I start digging for more and more of their music, and I just happen to stumble upon it on sites that aren't even really linked to the main internet, on page 15 of the search results, and I gather up all of their material. And then I just happen to get contacted by the legal representative of the band itself, and end up actually talking to these people. And I'm still seeing strange things up until this day, and having weird feelings, and dabbling in the occult. And so, well, I'm beyond dabbling at this point. I'm actually practicing the occult. This goes beyond coincidence. Now, I can be skeptical. And when I go, I love going to conspiracy forums, and I like looking at all of their stuff about cryptids and Bigfoot and Loch Ness and so forth, and aliens and government takeovers and ghosts and goblins and all, and hell and reincarnation and quantum physics and all of this stuff. And most of the time, I chuckle at these stories and I say that doesn't make sense. This is why. This is illogical. That's a fallacy. So forth. I am a skeptic. I don't just blindly believe all of the stuff that's going on. Like, everyone's talking about Operation American Spring. I'm convinced that it's a honeypot. and that the feds are going to show up at this rally and arrest everyone. People would say, I've actually, oddly enough, been called a pro-government shill on various forums where I've discussed this. I'm apparently now pro-government, despite my obvious libertarian leanings. And I've had people say that I'm an antichrist because I talk to people about the occult and so forth. Um, Even though I pointed out I'm not specifically anti-Christian, I'm not anti-spiritualist, I'm just anti-assholes. I'm anti-fundamentalism. I don't think people should be, insane bigots towards others. I support their free speech. If they want to be bigots, they can be bigots. I think they're wrong. I think their moral fiber is severely frayed. But I have had these experiences since childhood. I have seen weird things. I have heard weird things. The difference, as I pointed out, between someone like myself, who is spiritual, and someone who is religious, is that if I was religious, if I was a Christian, I would have seen that being, said, it is a demon, it is a being from hell, it's intelligent, it's got its own volition, it's trying to lead me to hellfire, I need to go to get an exorcism immediately. I don't see it that way, because for all I know, it's some sort of remnant force from another dimension. Or a reincarnated being, a bodhisattva or something. I don't know. I know that I saw something that fits the description of this being from the Ars Gotia. I am 100% certain it was physically there. It was not a dream. It was not a hallucination or a lucid episode or anything. It wasn't any of these things. It was literally there. I could hear it, see it, and probably if I had walked up to it, I probably could have felt it. It was actually there. The only difference being, I'm not ascribing to it a specific name. I say it looks like Stolas. It looks like it. It's beyond the realm of coincidence that I suddenly become obsessed with these same topics that Stolas supposedly teaches about, but I don't say that it's actually a demon. I can give it that term for people's convenience because that's what they generally would know it by if they're into the occult. But these events are not fancy. They're not dreams that I had when I was a little kid. These are real events. And I think to some extent, children, and I know this has been parroted before by others, and sometimes it gets a little bit old, but I do believe that this is correct. I think that occultists and people into the psychic arts or whatever, I think they're right when they say that people who are younger are more in tune to spiritual things. I think that's true. Because I've talked to other people, and they say when they're a kid, they see all these weird things. And I have to believe that there is something beyond simply the physical realm around us. Because I can even look to science, and I can say there are plenty of extraordinarily intelligent and entirely secular atheistic individuals, even within physics, who are proposing that there are dimensions above ours that basically, if you really want to think about it, quantum physics proves reincarnation or some sort of continuation after death. I don't even have to believe in a god or a religion. I don't even have to believe in the ideas of karma. I could disbelieve in magic altogether, and I could still look at science and I could say it is almost coinciding with religion at this point in some strange ways. And I believe that as time goes on, as science becomes more adept at finding these things out, I believe that it will coincide more with spirituality. Look, I pointed this out with herbalism. Pharmaceutical industry heals people, gives people medicine, better surgery, better everything. All these synthetic chemicals that can correct your mind and body and help you live a longer, healthier life, supposedly. Most of these substances were originally found in nature and only later synthesized. They're talking about, the venom of these weird snails, the cone shell, I can't remember exactly what they're called. They're those snails where if you step on them and get stabbed, you're going to get paralyzed almost immediately and probably drown. They're talking about how that can be used to treat, I can't remember what condition it is. It's apparently a potent medicine if it's administered properly. Bee stings have been used to relieve arthritis. The chemicals in bee stings actually do. They can numb the arthritis away. Marijuana, in the ancient world, would have been seen as a spiritual substance. It wouldn't have been seen as a medicine so much as they would have ascribed its medical benefits to driving out demons or unclean forces. but it's now science. They now know that it does have health benefits. The explanation of why is different, but the actual uh, medicine or the actual medical action that it's capable of taking on the body is the same. The only thing that's changed is instead of driving out demons, it's now used to treat glaucoma or alleviate pain or something. That's the fruits of Eden that I talk about in this book. People have lost this lore. People have lost any sort of respect for the spiritual world. I am not religious. I'm not even a theist. I don't have a god or a religion. I don't go around preaching to people saying convert to my path. Or I can offer to, and I do this with Satanism, I can offer them for me to teach them about this path to emulate the benefits it gave me when I was a Satanist. I don't say you have to stay a Satanist, you have to join the Church of Satan, you should, they don't even have to call themselves a Satanist. This is sort of just my own psychological workings. But these events from my childhood go beyond coincidence. I had these experiences. They were literal and real. I actually saw these things, and I wasn't hallucinating. I know what a hallucination is like. I know I've taken psilocybin and mescaline and all sorts of. I've smoked marijuana. I've taken LSD. I've taken LSA and ergine with Morning Glory. I've taken salvia. I've taken all sorts of hallucinogens and all sorts of deliriants. I've taken amanitas and datura and all of these things. And I have seen weird things, but they aren't real. And they don't truly appear to be real. At the time, they may, but in retrospect, you can say, well, that was weird. But I know that what I just saw wasn't ultimately, in the most physical sense, actually there. It wasn't actually real. I didn't actually see Charles Manson's head float across my leg on psilocybin. That's what I perceived myself as seeing. But with these other events from my childhood, it's not a perception. It was actually there. There's a vague difference between the two that I can tell is there, that I'm sure others who have dabbled with these substances or had lucid dreams or whatever can tell as well. I've had lucid dreams as well, particularly after my overdose on spice. By the way, again, don't take spice. It's terrible. Or ivory mist or any of these fucking substances. Uh, I had full-blown hallucinations, went to the ER and so forth, but for weeks afterwards I had weird lucid dreams, waking dreams where you'd have sleep paralysis and you'd feel like the dream was real and then you'd wake up in a cold sweat. I know what a lucid dream feels like. These things from my childhood don't fit that description even remotely. And it doesn't fit any of the symptoms of hallucination on any of the substances I took. From deliriums, which put you in a full-blown weird state where your vision's flashing and you're sort of in a waking dream, to psychedelics, where you're just seeing the world around you sort of morph and change, to something like salvia that causes things in the world to change around in sort of weird ways. I've got a story about salvia, by the way, that I don't think I actually told, that I should probably get into in the future because it was, one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life. No, I will not be putting my trip reports back up, however, because I no longer support that lifestyle. I've gleaned what I can. There are other people who can teach you about psychedelics. I'm not the one to ask about it because I was an idiot and used spice and overdosed and nearly died. So obviously, I am no longer qualified to give you specific advice on psychedelic substances. That's the reason I took my trip reports down, by the way. I told people it was because I no longer had interest. It's actually because I no longer have the confidence in myself to make that sort of material. So that's for all of you out there who keep asking about my trip reports. I will not be re-uploading them. I made that decision several months ago that I was considering at first. People said, well, I want to hear what you say about salvia and so forth. No, I'm not going to put them back up. I'm no longer qualified to speak to these things because I was an idiot. And if I was truly qualified to talk about these substances, other than spice, which I can tell people stay the fuck away from it, then I wouldn't have overdosed. I would have been smarter than that. I wouldn't have been addicted to this substance and used it continually until I almost died. What I am qualified to talk about are things like herbalism, the occult, history, theology, and things like that, philosophy, because I've studied them intently. And also, you're not going to overdose and die on history, unless you're staying up long hours in the library and you suddenly pass out in your books and dream that you're being attacked by George Washington or something. So that is a little bit about these events. I literally saw these things. You can believe it or not. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not saying you have to, uh, but I did. I did see this demon or energy or presence. I did see the Fenris Wolf from Radio Werewolf's Fiery Summons album outside of my window. I have heard weird growling noises when I was in Woodstock. And by the way, this is not Woodstock, the concert center. A lot of people get confused. It's a little town, not even really a town, but a little tiny village in eastern Vermont. Woodstock, the concert, took place in New York, in upstate New York. I think people get confused. I say I'm originally from Woodstock. They're like, "Wow, you must be a total hippie." No, it's a totally different place. It just has the same name. Probably because it's a heavily wooded area and people used to literally cut down and stock wood there and float it down the river for money. But that's about all. Take it or leave it. It doesn't matter to me. You can choose to believe that I'm lying to you or that I'm, just deluded and I was hallucinating as a child, or you can choose to believe me. I don't ask you that you believe that it was actually a demon. Just watch this video with an open mind. You can derive your own conclusions. It doesn't matter to me because your path is your own. I don't look at the spiritual as something I have to force upon others because it's wrong to do that. It can cause an imbalance. People have told me. One last thing that I wanted to get into that I really should make my a different video on this. People have said, well, to try to spite me, they'll say, well, I was a Satanist or an occultist or an atheist or whatever, and Jesus saved me, and now my life's so much better. I say, good for you. That's your own path. It is good that you feel better about yourself because you converted to Christianity. I don't have anything against you. But then you turn around as a Christian and say that I need to join your path to feel the same way, but you don't understand. I left Christianity to feel better about myself, to feel more positive and in tune with life. The only difference, you can't stand the fact that I derive pleasure from a path other than yours. I don't have a problem if you derive pleasure from Christianity or Islam or whatever. All I am saying is that for those within those religions that don't and want to join a different path, I'm there to help them. That's the only difference. I don't care if you're a Christian or a Muslim or whatever. I don't believe the religion is correct. I think there's a lot of weird stuff in it, and I think it lends itself well to violence and terror and genocide. But if you yourself derive pleasure from it, so be it. Keep being a Christian. Don't even consider joining Satanism because you'll probably be miserable because it's not for everyone. That's about all. Peace out.